The Honourable David Parker.
2 weeks out from a budget and we haven't had one contribution from the National Party on the economy or explaining why it is that their tax revenues $1.5 billion down. We hear Paula Bennett talking about welfare reform, another case where they're ignoring the big issues. Within 4 years, we spend 20 times the unemployment benefit on superannuation. We spend more on superannuation than we spend on the total of vote education. That's more than primary, secondary, preschool, tertiary and trade training. For the Minister to lecture us about welfare reform when she ignores what is the big issue shows how irrelevant she is to the big issues in this land. Then we hear her saying at the end of her contribution that unemployment's come down from, I think the figure she was used, 68,000 at peak to 54,000. 1,000 people a week are leaving to Australia. 1,000 people a week. That's 14 weeks of the departures to Australia in the figures that she claims credit for. Mr. Speaker, we're not hearing from the government about the economy because they've got nothing positive to talk about. A zero budget, or near to it, which we are contemplating, is what happens when your economy is not thriving, and that's why National is not talking about that. Mr. Speaker, there are two recent quotes I want to read. Sunday Star Times, 29th of April. The government is fast shredding its credibility as a sound manager of the economy. Each expedient deal it strikes erodes its integrity and its political capital. A management magazine in March said this. Management New Zealand said this. What's this? We think they're right. It says he seems to have a strong personal following. He could probably sell his vision if he had one and if he believed it was truly worth pursuing. The fact that he doesn't suggests a leadership strategy based more on expedience than inspiration. Mr. Speaker, we've got disappointing books in New Zealand because we've got disappointing growth figures in the economy. Yes, New Zealand will limp back to surplus in 2014, 2015. Virtually anyone in charge of the Treasury benches would have got back to surplus by 2014, 2015, including Labor, and indeed we produced the most detailed fiscals that have ever been produced by an opposition party at the time of the last election to show that. The difference between what we would have done and what National is doing is we would have addressed the underlying problems in the economy. We would have started to cause people to invest in the economy based on the profitability of their business investment rather than the tax effectiveness of what they were doing. We would have discouraged property speculation. We would have encouraged exports. We would have improved the wealth of New Zealand over time through improved savings. 3 times the additional savings from what we were proposing to KiwiSaver compared with what the National Party did. And those aren't our figures, those are the figures from the Savings Working Group. Those are the sorts of things that New Zealand needs to grow our economy. We are not getting them from National. As a consequence, the outlook for New Zealand is dire. Our net indebtedness to the world grows every year as a consequence of our exports not covering the cost of our interest and our imports. And every year that current account deficit is bridged by more borrowing from overseas and the sale of our assets. That's the driver of New Zealand's poor economic outlook. It's our current account deficit. And this government is not rebalancing the economy. And that's why the commentators are saying that this government is bereft of decent leadership on the economy. And that's why 1,000 people a week, 1,000 people a week. Keep that up for 2 years and you've lost the equivalent of the population of Dunedin. We need decent government procurement. We need to do what Australia does. Australia have just had a budget. It not only balances, they're increasing provision for families with children. They're increasing the amount that they can pay to people who are on a benefit because they've got growth in their economy.
Pesta Sam Lord Twiinga. Speaker, it's an honour to take this opportunity in the